I want to do a short video about these Himars multiple launch rocket systems that the US has decided they are going to send to Ukraine. I want to show you first this Guardian article. Himars, what are the advanced rockets US is sending Ukraine? The article says Joe Biden has announced the US will send advanced missile systems to Ukraine. The new weapon is the Himars Multiple Launch Rocket System, or MLRS, a mobile unit that can simultaneously launch multiple precision-guided missiles. Both Ukraine and Russia already operate MLRS, but Himars has superior range and precision. The article also says that the Himars that Washington is providing to Ukraine will have a range of about 50 miles or 80 kilometers, a US official told reporters. The Guardian also goes on to say Himars units carry one preloaded pod of 6 227-millimeter guided missiles. The M270 carries 2 pods, or one large pod loaded with an Army tactical missile system. The US will not supply Ukraine with that missile, which has a range of about 300 kilometers. With the small crew, the Himars can remove a spent pod and load a fresh one in minutes without other vehicles helping. Now, this part where they say without other vehicles helping, it just shows you how ignorant the people are, these so-called journalists who are going to help you understand the world better, how actually ignorant they are of the subject matter. Without other vehicles helping, it looks like this video clip here. This is the Himars MLRS picking up rockets while reloading. But who put those rockets there? Who put that actual next set of rockets there on the ground? It didn't just sprout out of the ground. Somebody put it there. So I have gone over this before. For a 9-vehicle battery, the smallest unit you would usually set up is a battery. That includes 9 of these launchers. You need to have about 10 to 15 trucks carrying these rockets, bringing these rockets in and staging them so that the Himars can pick them up and reload. The US uses trucks that look like this. In this video here, the process, as you can see, is not very fast. It's somewhat impractical for the conditions the Himars will be used under in Ukraine. And by that, I mean the constant threat of discovery and destruction by Russian forces. A lot of US systems, a lot of US weapon systems are designed under the assumption that the US will have air superiority and that they will have time to do things like this, unloading these rockets and, really taking their time. The M777, that's another example of a weapon system the US sent to Ukraine, and now it's in the middle of conditions it was never really designed for, where it's being towed by a truck. You have to set it up, put it into position, fire, and then pack it up and move to the next position. In Afghanistan, they didn't have to do that. They could set up a fire base, and they could sit there all month doing fire missions for units out on patrol. The Taliban had no way of reaching them. They didn't have an air force, didn't have long-range weapons, so they could do that. But in Ukraine, you cannot do that. And the same goes for the Himars. The US can set them up, have a big area where they're all set up. They could bring in trucks and unload the ammunition. They could take their time doing that, and they do fire missions on, ISIS targets or whoever they claim they're fighting in Syria or Iraq. And those units have no ability of striking back at the US. But in this case, Ukraine cannot. They cannot do that. They cannot set up their Himars and stage all the ammunition out in the open and take their time doing that. The longer that they're sitting around, not moving, the higher probability Russia has of finding them and destroying them. I have said that Ukraine had these systems at the beginning of this conflict. They're losing many of them. And Russia also has these systems. And you would say, well, doesn't Russia have the same problem? Staging ammunition, loading it, reloading it. Russia has an air force. They're operating over Ukraine. They also have the world's best air defense systems I've pointed this out many times. This is a US government-funded think tank, CSIS. This is their missile defense project. And this article is called Russian Air and Missile Defense. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union invested heavily in its air defense systems. As a result, Russia now possesses some of the most advanced air and missile defense systems in the world. Russia has air defenses, they have air power. This is what affords them the protection to use multiple launch rocket systems without having to worry too much about Ukraine hitting back. Ukraine does not have this luxury on the battlefield. Now, getting back to the Guardian article, it says the crews will require some training. The crews will require some training. I've pointed this out many times before, and I've pointed out this. This is from the U.S. Army's official website, Multiple Launch Rocket System, MLRS, Himars Crewmember. They have to already be trained, a basic soldier, and then they require another 4 weeks. And down here, this is the ASVAB score. This means 95 out of 100. That means you need to be pretty smart. You need to be good at math. You need to have good visual spatial skills to be able to even qualify to train as an operator for the Himars system. The Himars vehicle itself requires 3 operators. If you have a battery of 9 vehicles, that means 27 operators. So the US has to train at least 27 Ukrainians as operators on these systems, just these 9 systems. But when the US Army is talking about training an operator for 4 weeks, they're going to send them to a battery with experienced personnel that know all of the other things that you actually need to know to use the Himars effectively on the battlefield. That I don't know who that's going to be in Ukraine. The Guardian also says the GPS-guided missiles the Himars shoots, I think they meant rockets, have a range about double that of the M777 howitzers, which are making no difference right now, by the way, that the US recently supplied to Ukraine forces. At roughly 80 kilometers, it generally puts Himars out of range of Russia's own artillery while placing the Russian batteries at risk. And okay, maybe they're guns, but not their rockets and not their Iskander missiles. They have these missiles that can go much, much further than the Himars can. The article also says it also could threaten Russian supply depots amid Western belief that the Russian forces suffer logistical problems. Some analysts have said Himars can be a game changer in the war at a time when Ukraine forces appear to be struggling under Russian artillery fire. They're not struggling, they're just being outright defeated, completely defeated. But others say Himars will not suddenly turn the tables. The Himars would even the playing field, a senior US defense official said. Now, first of all, about the GPS-guided rockets. They have GPS-guided rockets, and I want to show you this Times article here. Russia takes battle into space and targets GPS in Ukraine. This article says, GPS jamming has become a common tool in Russia's arsenal, and the Russian military has frequently jammed GPS signals in Ukraine since 2014, a think tank said. Well before the invasion began in February, Russia was actively jamming GPS signals throughout the area. General David Thompson, U.S. Space Force Vice Chief of Space Operations, told NBC in April, Ukraine may not be able to use GPS because there are jammers around that prevent them from receiving any usable signal. So if that's the case, and these rockets are guided by GPS, then the whole idea that, well, the Himars is better than Russian rocket artillery because it's so precise, that one advantage that the Himars supposedly had, that's totally negated. So that's one thing to watch, though. Let's watch and see how precise these Himars actually are if and when they begin firing on the battlefield, keeping in mind that Russia can jam GPS signals and have been throughout the conflict. Another point to make is that Russian air defense can shoot down rockets fired by multiple launch rocket systems. They have been doing that throughout this conflict. And the longer the rocket is in the air, the further you're trying to shoot it, the more time Russia has to acquire the target and shoot it down. So that is going to be another aspect to consider when talking about what kind of game-changing effect the Himars is going to have. Now, in order to overcome these these two problems that the HIMARS systems face in Ukraine. Number one, GPS jamming, so they're not going to be as accurate. And number two, Russian air defense systems that can shoot down 1 or 2 rockets being fired at a time. In order to overcome this, you would shoot many rockets all at one time. That means you have so many rockets incoming that Russia can't shoot them all down at the same time. And also, whatever it is that you're trying to hit, because you don't know if the rocket is going to hit that target directly, you shoot many to make sure at least you come close. And in order to do that, you need a lot of ammunition. In order to have a lot of ammunition, you need to have a lot of those trucks coming in. You saw that process, how slow it is. They're going to have to stage, basically build mountains of ammunition for the HIMARS to go through. And what this does is make the HIMARS battery itself and the ammunition staging more vulnerable to being found, targeted, and destroyed by Russia. So ultimately, the Guardian is saying that some analysts have said the HIMARS, that it'll be a game changer. Others said it'll even the playing field. I say, no, it's not going to do either. What it's going to do is make a lot of money for Lockheed Martin when they get the backfill order to replace whatever they send Ukraine. You know, that's like Raytheon. They got a backfill order to replace all the Stingers they sent to Ukraine that made no difference. And, you know, the reason the Pentagon is not telling Washington or telling the public that sending HIMARS to Ukraine is going to make no difference. It makes absolutely no sense to do. It's impractical. The reason they don't do that is because the top brass at the Pentagon are all in the pocket of arms manufacturers. The current U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, he left a board of directors position at Raytheon to become the Secretary of Defense. So check out this article. Biden defense pick to get up to $1.7 million from Raytheon roll. And it says retired General Lloyd Austin, President-elect Joe Biden's pick for defense secretary, may get as much as $1.7 million in payments tied to the board seat he'd be giving up at defense contractor Raytheon Technologies Company. As soon as practicable, but not later than 90 days after my confirmation, I will divest my financial interest in Raytheon, Austin wrote in his ethics agreement with the Pentagon and his financial disclosure report, which are being released Sunday by the Office of Government Ethics. He also pledged to recuse himself for 1 year from decisions involving Raytheon, the nation's #3 defense contractor. And I'm sure there's no impropriety at all going on in the Pentagon. That's what we're expected to believe. So will HIMARS make a difference in Ukraine? No. Will it make a lot of money for Lockheed Martin? Yes. And I think that is a little microcosm of this entire conflict, that the U.S. itself started all the way back in 2014 when they overthrew the elected government of Ukraine, and they installed a government into power that from that point on was not looking out for the best interests of Ukraine. They were looking out for the best interests of Wall Street and Washington. And we could see this in many ways, them making money off of Ukraine and them using Ukraine as a battering ram against their adversaries, namely Russia. So let's keep an eye on the progress these HIMARS make getting over to Ukraine. They already have some in Europe that they could just send over the border, but they also need to train the crews that are going to operate them. And again, the logistics is going to be a nightmare. So we'll see how that all plays out. And waiting in Donbas for them is a huge number of Russian multiple launch rocket systems, the Iskander missile system, Russian aviation, GPS jamming, and air defenses. So let's keep an eye on all of that. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. And if you're watching this on YouTube, check the video description below for other places you can find my work, like on Telegram, on Odyssey, and on Rumble, just in case YouTube decides to one day delete my channel. They've already deleted me off of Twitter. In the video description below, I put all of the articles and resources that I used while making this video, so check that out. And also in the video description below are ways you can help support my work. You can do that through Buy Me a Coffee, through Patreon, and through PayPal. And to everyone who has been helping out, whether it's a monthly membership or a one-time donation, or even if you're just helping share my work with other people, I greatly appreciate all of that help. I could not do this work without it. So thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.